So, this wealthy teenage girl gets kidnapped by a cult, shoved into a closet for 2 months, and instead of trying to escape, she decides, you know what? These guys have some solid points, and becomes a machine gun-toting bank robber. I'm not talking about a movie plot. I'm talking about an American heiress, a girl with a trust fund that could buy a small country, who ends up on the FBI's most wanted list as a domestic terrorist. She goes from sipping tea in her bathrobe to spraying bullets at a sporting goods store in the span of about 60 days. And the wildest part? To this day, nobody knows if she was actually brainwashed into a living weapon, or if she just got bored of being rich and decided to play Grand Theft Auto in real life. Buckle up, because this story is going to make you question everything you think you know about the human brain. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button immediately, because we dive into the absolute darkest, most insane stories on the internet, and trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. Today, we are looking at the case of Patty Hearst, a story so bizarre that if you wrote it as fiction, editors would throw it in the trash for being unrealistic. But every single thing I'm about to tell you actually happened. Let's set the scene. It's 1974. The world is already kind of losing its mind. Nixon is sweating through his suits over Watergate, the Vietnam War is winding down, but the protests are still raging, and the counterculture movement is shifting from peace and love to let's blow stuff up. In the middle of all this chaos, you have Patricia Hearst. She goes by Patty. She's 19 years old, a sophomore at the University of California, Berkeley. Now, Patty isn't just some random college student eating ramen noodles and worrying about student loans. Patty is royalty. Well, American royalty. She is the granddaughter of William Randolph Hearst. For those of you who slept through history class, William Randolph Hearst was the guy who basically invented modern media. He was the inspiration for Citizen Kane. The Hearst family is insanely wealthy, incredibly powerful, and they control a massive chunk of the newspapers and media outlets in the country. So Patty is living that high life, right? Well, actually, no. She's kind of trying to downplay the whole billionaire heiress thing. She's living in a regular apartment in Berkeley with her fiancé, a guy named Stephen Weed. Stephen is a philosophy teacher, which is exactly the kind of guy you date when you're 19 and trying to annoy your rich dad. They're living a quiet domestic life. They're planning a wedding, they're buying dishes, they're doing laundry. It's boring, it's normal. Until the night of February 4th, 1974. It's a Tuesday night. Patty and Stephen are chilling in their apartment. Patty's wearing a blue bathrobe. They're probably watching TV or studying, just a typical night. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. Now, in 1974, people actually answered their doors without checking a Ring camera first, which is mistake number one. Stephen opens the door, and chaos erupts instantly. Boom, 3 people burst in, 2 men and a woman, and they aren't selling Girl Scout cookies. They are armed with guns, and they proceed to beat the living daylights out of Stephen Weed. They smash him in the face, kick him while he's down, and basically incapacitate him immediately. Now, I gotta ask, what would you do in this situation? I know we all like to think we'd go John Wick mode, but Stephen Weed, well, let's just say Stephen Weed didn't exactly save the day. He gets knocked out and the intruders grab Patty. She's screaming, she's terrified, she's blindfolded, gagged, and dragged out of her apartment half naked. They throw her into the trunk of a stolen Chevy convertible. Can you imagine the terror? One minute you're safe in your living room, the next you're folded up in a trunk, bleeding, confused, bouncing around as a car speeds away into the night. Neighbors hear the screaming, they see the car peel out, and just like that, the heiress to the Hearst empire is gone, vanished. So, who are these kidnappers? Is it the mafia? Is it some foreign government? No, it's a group you've probably never heard of until right now. They call themselves the Symbionese Liberation Army, or the SLA. Sounds impressive, right? Like a massive military organization? Wrong. The SLA is basically a handful of upper-middle-class white kids led by an escaped convict named Donald DeFreeze.
Let's talk about Donald DeFreeze for a second. This guy calls himself Field Marshal Cinque. He's got a history of mental instability, he's broken out of prison, and he somehow managed to convince a bunch of upper-middle-class white kids that he's the leader of a revolution. Their symbol is a seven-headed cobra. Their philosophy is a mashup of Marxism, anti-racism, and incoherent rambling. They want to destroy the capitalist insect that preys on the people. And in their minds, the Hearst family is the ultimate capitalist insect. They don't want money. Well, they do, but not a ransom in the traditional sense. They want to make a statement. They view kidnapping Patty Hearst not as a crime, but as a political prisoner situation. They take her to a safe house in Daly County, and this is where the psychological torture begins. They don't throw her in a cell. They throw her in a closet, a literal closet. It's tiny, cramped, and dark. They keep her blindfolded for weeks. Weeks, fam. She has no idea where she is, no idea if she's going to die, and she's completely cut off from the outside world. She can't see, she can barely move. She has to rely on her captors for everything: food, water, using the bathroom. This is textbook sensory deprivation. It's designed to break a person down, to wipe their slate clean so you can write whatever you want on it. While Patty is rotting in the closet, the SLA starts their media campaign. Remember, they kidnapped a media heiress. They know this is going to be on every front page in America. They send a communique, a fancy word for a letter, to a local radio station. They include her student ID card just to prove they have her. The message is addressed to her father, Randolph Hearst. It basically says, "We have your daughter. She is a prisoner of war. Do not call the cops or she dies." Randolph Hearst is a wreck. He goes on TV pleading for his daughter's life. He's not a villain here. He's a dad who just wants his kid back. But the SLA isn't interested in mercy. They release an audio tape. And this is the first time the world hears Patty's voice since the kidnapping. On the tape, Patty sounds terrified. She's shaky. She says, "Mom, Dad, I'm okay. I had a few scrapes, but they washed them up." She tells them not to worry, but you can hear the fear dripping off every word. But then the SLA makes their demand, and it is bonkers. They don't ask for $1 million in unmarked bills. They demand that Randolph Hearst feed the poor. Specifically, they want him to provide $70 of high-quality food to every single needy person in California. Not just a soup kitchen meal. We're talking steaks, fresh produce, the good stuff. Experts crunch the numbers and realize that to fulfill this demand, it would cost Randolph Hearst about $400 million. In 1974 money, that's billions today. Randolph is rich, but he's not feed the entire state of California with filet mignon rich. He comes out and says, "Look, I can't do $400 million, but I'll put up $2 million. I'll do everything I can." He sets up a program called People in Need. He starts buying massive amounts of food to distribute in the Bay Area. He is trying to buy his daughter's life with groceries. But because this is the SLA and they have no idea how to actually organize anything, the food distribution turns into a total disaster. Thousands of people show up. The trucks arrive and people start rioting. They're throwing frozen turkeys through windows. They're fighting over boxes of cereal. It's absolute chaos. The SLA watches this on TV and laughs. They release another tape mocking Randolph Hearst, saying the food was garbage and that he's trying to poison the people. Meanwhile, back in the closet, something is happening to Patty. She's been in the dark for weeks. The only voices she hears are the SLA members. They start talking to her. At first, it's interrogation. They accuse her of being a bourgeois pig. They tell her that her parents don't love her, that her fiancé Stephen Weed is moving on with his life, and that the FBI doesn't care if she dies in a raid. They start lecturing her on their political ideology. They read her their manifestos. And here's the thing about the human brain. When you are isolated, terrified, and dependent on someone for your survival, you start to bond with them. It's a survival mechanism. We know it as Stockholm Syndrome, named after a bank robbery in Sweden where the hostages ended up defending the robbers. Patty is the ultimate case study for this. The SLA members, Cinque, Teco, Yolanda, they start treating her a little better. They let her out of the closet for short periods, they give her food, they tell her that they are the good guys, fighting a corrupt system, and that her father is the enemy. And slowly, piece by piece, the old Patty Hearst begins to dissolve. Think about it. She's 19. She's impressionable. And she's currently living in a reality where the only truth is what the SLA tells her. They tell her that the police are going to storm the house and kill everyone, including her. They tell her that her only chance of survival is to join them. About 2 months into the kidnapping, the SLA makes her an offer. They say, okay, the ransom has sort of been met. You can go home. We'll release you. Or she can stay and fight for the revolution.
Now, if you were in this situation, you'd be sprinting out that door, right? You'd be running back to your parents' mansion so fast you'd leave a cartoon smoke trail. But Patty Hearst doesn't leave. On April 3rd, 1974, the SLA releases a new tape. And when the world hears this tape, jaws drop to the floor. It's Patty's voice, but it doesn't sound like the scared little girl anymore. Her voice is hard. It's angry. She says, "I have been given the choice of being released or staying and fighting for my freedom and the freedom of all oppressed people. I have chosen to stay and fight." She denounces her family. She calls her dad a pig, and she takes a new name. I have been given the name Tania. Tania, named after a comrade who fought with Che Guevara. The heiress is gone. The revolutionary is here. The media goes absolutely insane. Is she faking it? Is she doing this just to survive? Or has she actually flipped? Tell me in the comments right now, do you think she was faking it at this point, or was she fully brainwashed? Because what happens next suggests that she wasn't just pretending. 2 weeks later, April 15, 1974, the Hibernia Bank in San Francisco. It's a quiet morning. Customers are depositing checks. Tellers are counting cash. Suddenly, the doors fly open and the SLA storms in. They are armed with carbines and assault rifles. They scream, "This is the SLA! Get on the floor!" And there, right in the middle of the lobby, caught on the security cameras, is Patty Hearst, Tania. She's holding an M1 carbine. She's wearing a wig and a trench coat. She's not cowering in the corner. She's barking orders. She's pointing her gun at civilians. She yells, "I'm Tania," up against the wall. The footage is iconic. It is one of the most famous images of the 20th century. The girl who was kidnapped is now robbing a bank with her kidnappers. They grab over $10,000 and flee. When the FBI sees this footage, they are stunned. The narrative shifts instantly. She's not a victim anymore. She's an armed and dangerous fugitive. Her face gets plastered on wanted posters alongside the people who kidnapped her. Her dad is on TV saying, "That's not my daughter. She's being forced to do this." But the public isn't so sure. She looked pretty comfortable holding that gun. The SLA is now on the run. They've got heat on them like never before. They move from San Francisco down to Los Angeles to hide out. And this is where things go from bank robbery movie to absolute war zone. While in LA, the SLA needs supplies, so Bill Harris, Teco, and Emily Harris, Yolanda, decide to go shopping at a sporting goods store. Because when you are the most wanted people in America, the smartest thing to do is go to a public store and shoplift a pair of socks. I'm not joking. Bill Harris tries to steal a bandolier and some socks. The store clerk catches him. A scuffle breaks out. Bill Harris pulls a gun, but the gun falls out of his waistband. The clerk tackles him. It looks like it's over. The SLA leaders are about to get caught for shoplifting socks. But Patty Hearst is waiting in the van across the street. She sees her comrades getting tackled. She has a decision to make. She could drive away, she could surrender, she could do nothing. Instead, she grabs a submachine gun, leans out the window of the van, and opens fire on the storefront. She sprays the building with bullets.
Glass shatters, people dive for cover. The distraction works. Bill and Emily Harris manage to break free, run to the van, and they peel out. Patty Hearst didn't just participate, she saved them. She attempted to kill innocent people to rescue her kidnappers. If there was any doubt that she was in, that doubt just evaporated. But now, they have a problem. Their van is compromised. They need a new car. So they carjack a high school student named Tom Matthews. They throw him in the back of his own van and drive around with him for hours. And here's the weird part. Tom Matthews later testified that Patty was chatting with him. She was relaxed. She talked about how much she hated her parents. She talked about the revolution. She loaded her gun while making small talk. Does that sound like a terrified hostage to you? Or does that sound like someone who has completely lost touch with her old reality? The police eventually find the van, and inside, they find a parking ticket. A parking ticket that leads to a specific neighborhood in Compton. The LAPD SWAT team, which was a brand new concept at the time, mobilizes. They find the safe house where the SLA is hiding. May 17th, 1974, it's a sunny afternoon in Los Angeles. The police surround a small house on 54th Street. They have bullhorns. They have flak jackets. They have enough firepower to level a city block. They demand the SLA surrender. The SLA answers with automatic weapon fire. What follows is one of the most intense shootouts in American history. Thousands of rounds are exchanged. The police are firing tear gas. The SLA is firing back from under the floorboards. The news helicopters are circling overhead, broadcasting the whole thing live to millions of Americans. People are watching this while eating their TV dinners. The tear gas canisters ignite a fire. The house starts to burn. The smoke is billowing out. The SLA members are trapped inside. They have a choice. Come out and surrender, or burn. They choose to burn. 6 members of the SLA die in that house. Donald DeFreeze, the leader, shoots himself as the flames close in. The others die from smoke inhalation, burns, or gunshot wounds. The house collapses into a pile of ash. The world watches horrified. Everyone assumes Patty Hearst is in there. Her parents are watching on TV thinking they are witnessing the death of their daughter. But when the smoke clears and the coroner identifies the bodies, Patty isn't there. She wasn't in the house. She and the Harrises were holed up in a motel room down the street watching the whole thing on television. Can you imagine that level of trauma? Watching your new family, the people who brainwashed you, burning to death on live TV? Now, logic would dictate that this is the moment you give up. The leader is dead, the group is decimated, it's over. But Patty Hearst doesn't turn herself in. She goes deeper underground. For the next year and a half, Patty Hearst is a ghost. She travels cross-country with the remnants of the SLA. They are aided by a network of radicals who hide them in farmhouses and apartments. During this time, she's not trying to call home. She's helping the SLA write a book. She's participating in more crimes. She's fully immersed in the lifestyle. The FBI is looking everywhere. They are chasing leads in every state. This is the biggest manhunt in the country, and they can't find a 19-year-old girl with a very recognizable face. It's actually kind of embarrassing for the feds. They're getting outsmarted by a group of incompetent radicals who shoplift socks. Finally, in September 1975, the FBI gets a break. They track the group to an apartment in San Francisco. They kick in the door, and there she is, Patty Hearst, Tania. She's lost weight, she looks different, but it's her. When they arrest her, she doesn't cry. She doesn't say, "Thank God you saved me." She's defiant. She's smiling. They take her to the police station to book her. And this is the moment that seals her fate in the court of public opinion. The booking officer asks her for her occupation. Usually people say student or waitress. Patty Hearst looks her in the eye and says, "Urban guerilla." Urban guerilla. Not hostage, not victim. She is declaring herself a soldier. She throws up a clenched fist salute for the cameras. She is all in. But then, the deprogramming begins. Patty is separated from the SLA members. She's put in solitary. She starts seeing doctors and lawyers. Her family hires F. Lee Bailey, one of the most famous defense attorneys in the world, and slowly the Tania persona starts to crack. She starts to tell a different story. She says she was brainwashed. She says she was terrified every single moment. She says the smiling, the salute, the urban guerilla comment, it was all an act she had to keep up because she thought the SLA had snipers watching her ready to kill her if she stepped out of line. She claims that during the bank robbery, there were guns pointed at her from off camera. So the trial of the century begins.
It's 1976. The courtroom is packed. The whole world is debating, is Patty Hearst a terrorist or a victim? The defense argues coercive persuasion. They bring in psychiatrists to explain brainwashing. They explain how the closet, the sensory deprivation, the constant fear rewrote her personality. They argue that she had no free will. The prosecution, on the other hand, paints a different picture. They play the tapes. They show the video of her firing the gun at the sporting goods store, where she was alone in the car and could have driven away. They point to the fact that she had multiple opportunities to escape over the 19 months she was missing. They say she wasn't a hostage, she was a rebel looking for a cause. The prosecutor destroys her on the stand. He asks, "Did you have a strong feeling about the SLA?" She answers, "I had a strong feeling that I didn't want to die." It's compelling, but the jury isn't buying it. They look at the gun. They look at the urban guerrilla form. They look at the tapes. On March 20th, 1976, Patricia Hearst is found guilty of bank robbery and using a firearm in the commission of a felony. The judge sentences her to 35 years in prison. 35 years for a girl who was kidnapped from her own apartment. It seems harsh, right? The judge later reduces it to 7 years, but still, she's going to prison. Now, hit that subscribe button if you think she got a raw deal, because the story doesn't end in a cell. Patty goes to prison, but the public sentiment starts to shift. People start to realize, wait a minute, if she hadn't been kidnapped, none of this would have happened. She wouldn't have woken up one day and decided to rob a bank. The root cause of all her crimes was the violence done to her. A massive campaign begins to get her released, and it works. In 1979, President Jimmy Carter commutes her sentence. She serves 22 months total. She walks out of prison, back into the arms of the family she once called pigs. She marries her bodyguard, she has kids, she writes a book, she acts in some John Waters movies. Seriously, look it up. She's in Cry Baby. She becomes normal. The revolutionary Tania disappears as quickly as she appeared. Years later, on his last day in office, President Bill Clinton grants her a full pardon. Her record is wiped clean. She is officially innocent in the eyes of the law. But the question remains, and it's the question that makes this case so fascinating decades later: what actually happened in that closet? Was Patty Hearst a mastermind who got bored of her rich life and wanted to play revolutionary? Or was she the victim of one of the most brutal psychological experiments in history? Did she believe the things she said, or was she just a 19-year-old girl doing whatever she had to do to keep breathing? Think about the human mind like a computer. If you smash the hard drive, wipe the operating system, and install new software, is it still the same computer? The SLA smashed Patty Hearst. They wiped her identity. They installed Tania. And for 19 months, that software ran perfectly. It's terrifying because it suggests that any of us, under the right or wrong circumstances, could become someone completely different. You think you know who you are. You think you have strong values. You think you'd never rob a bank. But put you in a closet for 57 days, threaten your life, tell you everyone you love hates you, and who knows who walks out of that door. So, is this guy, or girl in this case, cooked? Or was she just surviving the only way she knew how? Let me know your verdict in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the madness of the 70s, make sure you like this video and share it with a friend who thinks their family drama is bad. Trust me, until you've been kidnapped by a cult and forced to rob a bank, your family drama is
mild. I'm Ray William Johnson, and I'll see you next time. Okay, you guys, we need to rewind a bit because I glossed over some of the absolute insanity that was the SLA. I told you they were a cult, but that word doesn't even do it justice. This wasn't like a sophisticated operation. Donald DeFreeze, Field Marshal Cinque, was essentially a guy who had spent most of his life in prison and realized that if he used big political words, rich college kids would listen to him. The group consisted of DeFreeze and a bunch of young women and a couple of men who were, frankly, bored with their privileged lives. They were reading Mao and Marx and convincing themselves that shooting random people was justice. Before they kidnapped Patty, they had already murdered a school superintendent named Marcus Foster because they thought he was introducing ID cards in schools. That was their big cause, ID cards. So they shot him with cyanide-tipped bullets. This is the level of delusion we are dealing with. When they grabbed Patty, they didn't even really have a plan. They threw her in the trunk of that Chevy and they drove her to their hideout, which was just a regular house in a residential neighborhood. And that closet? Let's get visceral with the closet. It was padded with soundproofing materials. It was tiny. Patty described it as being buried alive. She couldn't stand up, she had a bucket for a toilet, and for the first few days she didn't eat. When she did eat, it was meager. DeFreeze would come to the door of the closet and just talk. He wouldn't scream, he would lecture. He would tell her the history of his life, the history of the struggle. He told her that her father was a war criminal. He told her that her mother was a leech on society. And he told her that he, Cinque, was the only person that actually cared about her survival. This is a classic manipulation tactic. It's called trauma bonding. You create a situation of extreme terror, and then you offer small mercies. A glass of water, a piece of bread, a kind word. The victim's brain is so starved of dopamine, so desperate for safety, that it latches onto these small mercies and interprets them as love or protection. The captor becomes the savior. By the time they let her out of the closet, she was disoriented. Her vision was blurry, she had lost weight, she was weak, and they handed her a gun. They taught her how to break it down and clean it. They told her, this is your instrument of liberation. Now, imagine you are Patty. You haven't seen the sun in 2 months. You've been told your parents abandoned you, and now these people, who are the only people you interact with, are treating you like a comrade. They give you a new name. They give you a purpose. Is it any wonder she broke? Let's talk about the bank robbery again. The Hibernia Bank. The camera footage is grainy, but if you look closely, you can see the positioning. DeFreeze is there, other members are there, Patty is in the center. The defense later argued that there were other members out of frame with guns pointed at her. But look at her body language. She's spreading her legs in a combat stance. She's swinging the muzzle of the carbine to cover the crowd. She yells with authority. There's a moment during the robbery where they're exiting. They have the money, and Patty is the last one out. She could have stayed. She could have dropped to the floor and waited for the cops. But she runs out with them. She jumps in the getaway car. And the getaway, it wasn't smooth. They had to switch cars. They were disorganized. It was a miracle they didn't get caught right then and there. After the robbery, they went back to the safe house and watched themselves on the news. They drank beer. They celebrated. Patty was high-fiving them. She later said in court that she was acting, that she had to pretend to be happy or they would kill her. But witnesses who saw them during this period said she seemed genuinely affectionate with them. She was sleeping with one of the members, a guy named Willie Wolf, Cujo. This adds a whole other layer of complexity. Was it a romantic relationship, or was it sexual assault coerced by the circumstances? She later claimed it was rape. She said she was forced to have sex with DeFreeze and Wolf. The prosecution tried to frame it as a love affair that turned her to their side. It's disgusting to think about, but it was a central part of the trial. The Bonnie and Clyde narrative versus the victim of abuse narrative. The Mel's sporting goods incident is the one that really sticks with me. This is the moment that separates the hostage theory from the terrorist theory for a lot of people. She was alone in the van, the keys were in the ignition. She could have driven to a police station. She could have driven home. She could have just sat there and let the Harrises get arrested. Instead, she picks up a submachine gun, a weapon that has significant recoil, and she fires it with precision. She shoots up the sign, she shoots the glass,